The clock on Andre's dashboard read 11:42 p.m. as he drove through the quiet streets of Oak Ridge Heights. His eyes burned from the 14-hour workday, but his mind was already home, imagining the comfort of his bed after 3 grueling days of meetings in Chicago. The passing streetlights cast rhythmic shadows across his face as he adjusted his tie, loosening it enough to breathe properly for the first time since morning. The neighborhood around him was all manicured lawns and 2-story homes with multiple garages, the kind of suburb where property values never seemed to drop. Andre had driven this route countless times on his way home from the airport, preferring the scenic detour over the congested highway. Tonight, the streets were practically empty, just the occasional cat darting across perfectly trimmed lawns. He yawned, reaching to turn up the volume on the late-night jazz station. The smooth saxophone solo was just hitting its stride when flashing blue and red lights filled his rearview mirror. "You've got to be kidding me," Andre muttered, checking his speedometer. He'd been going exactly 3 miles under the limit, careful as always when driving through this particular neighborhood. He pulled over smoothly, positioning his car properly against the curb before shutting off the engine. Andre took a deep breath and placed both hands on the steering wheel where they could be clearly seen. Working in intelligence for 12 years had taught him to manage tense situations with a clear head. This was just a routine stop, probably a broken taillight he hadn't noticed. 2 officers approached, one on each side of his car. The taller one, a white man with a military-style crew cut who looked to be in his early 30s, shined a flashlight directly into Andre's face. "License and registration," the officer said, not bothering with a greeting. His nameplate read Williams. "Good evening, officer," Andre replied, keeping his voice even. "May I ask why I've been pulled over?" The officer's face remained expressionless. "License and registration first, sir." Andre nodded. "I'm going to reach for my wallet in my back pocket and then get my registration from the glove compartment. Is that all right?" The officer gave a curt nod, his flashlight beam never wavering from Andre's face. Moving deliberately, Andre retrieved his license and registration, handing them to Officer Williams. On the passenger side, the second officer, his nameplate read Reynolds, Calvin, was peering into the car, his flashlight beam sweeping across the interior. "Where are you coming from tonight?" Williams asked, studying Andre's license. "O'Hare, just got back from a work trip to Chicago." "What kind of work?" "Consulting," Andre answered simply. It wasn't exactly a lie. His role as a senior intelligence analyst often involved consulting with various government agencies, though he couldn't elaborate on the specifics. "Consulting," Williams repeated, drawing out the word like he was tasting something suspicious. "And what brings you through this neighborhood at this hour?" "I live about 10 minutes from here. This route avoids the highway traffic." Officer Reynolds tapped on the passenger window. Andre pressed the button to lower it. "What's in the briefcase?" Reynolds asked, pointing to the sleek black case on the passenger seat floor. "Work materials. Confidential client information," Andre replied. The officers exchanged a glance that made Andre's stomach tighten. Something wasn't right. "Step out of the vehicle, please," Williams said, stepping back slightly. "May I ask why?" "I don't understand what the problem is." "Sir, we've had reports of break-ins in this area." "You match the description of a suspect seen leaving one of the houses earlier tonight." Andre's heart rate picked up, but his face remained calm. "What description would that be exactly?" A moment of uncomfortable silence followed. Officer Williams's jaw tightened. "Just step out of the car, sir, now." Andre complied, moving slowly and keeping his hands visible. The night air was cool against his face as he stood up, straightening his charcoal suit jacket. "Turn around and place your hands on the vehicle," Williams instructed. As Andre did so, he asked, "Am I being detained, officer?" "We're just conducting an investigation. Spread your feet." Andre felt the officer's hands patting him down, checking his pockets, his ankles, his waistband. The indignity of it burned, but he kept his breathing steady. "Nothing on him," Williams said to his partner. "Let's check the vehicle." "Do you have a warrant?" Andre asked, turning to face them. "Or probable cause?" "Because I don't consent to a search of my vehicle." "Sir, your behavior is suspicious and you match the description of a robbery suspect." "That gives us probable cause," Reynolds said, already opening the passenger door. Andre knew this was a stretch of the law, but arguing wouldn't help his situation. He watched as Reynolds picked up his briefcase. "Open this," Reynolds demanded, holding it out. I can't do that, Andre said firmly. That contains classified information. It's locked with a biometric seal and I'm not authorized to open it outside secure facilities. Both officers stiffened. Classified information? What are you, some kind of spy? Williams asked with a mocking smile. Open the case or we'll consider it suspicious. I understand this puts us in a difficult position, Andre said calmly, but I legally cannot open that case. If you'd like, I can make a call to verify my employment, though it's late. Yeah, I bet, Williams scoffed. Hands behind your back, sir. What? You're arresting me? On what charge? Obstruction for now. Maybe more once we figure out what you're hiding in this case. I'm not obstructing anything. I'm simply following federal security protocols. Andre explained, his composure finally beginning to crack. Listen, I work for the government. If you'll just allow me to make a phone call, hands behind your back, Williams repeated more forcefully this time, his hand moving to his belt. Andre knew when a situation was escalating beyond repair. He'd been trained to recognize the signs. Continuing to resist would only make things worse. Slowly, he placed his hands behind his back, feeling the cold metal of handcuffs snap around his wrists moments later. This is completely unnecessary, he said quietly. Stop resisting, Williams said loudly, though Andre had been perfectly still. I'm not resisting, Andre replied, confusion in his voice. Suddenly, Williams pushed him roughly against the car. I said stop resisting. The officer's voice had risen to a shout, and Andre realized with a sinking feeling what was happening. It was an old tactic, create the appearance of resistance where none existed. His forehead pressed against the cool metal of his car roof as Williams continued to apply pressure. Check his car thoroughly, Williams called to Reynolds, and get that case open. You don't have the authority to open that, Andre said, his voice strained from the awkward position. It contains matters of national security. Right, Reynolds laughed. National security. Andre watched helplessly as Reynolds placed the briefcase on the hood and attempted to force it open. The case's security features would prevent any unauthorized access. But that wouldn't stop them from trying, or from charging him with additional offenses for whatever they imagined was inside. You're making a serious mistake, Andre said quietly. Save it for the judge, and Williams replied, pulling him away from the car and toward the police cruiser. You can explain to them how you're secretly James Bond. As he was guided into the back seat of the patrol car, Andre caught a glimpse of a neighbor watching from their window. At least there was a witness to this absurd scene. He would need all the help he could get to fight whatever charges they decided to invent. The door slammed shut, and Andre sat in the dimly lit back seat, his mind already working through his options. He wouldn't be allowed his phone call until processing at the station. By then, it would be the middle of the night. And explaining his actual job would be complicated. He wasn't authorized to reveal certain details except to specific people with the right clearances. Through the window, he could see the officers still attempting to access his briefcase, growing increasingly frustrated. They wouldn't be able to open it, which would only make them more determined to find out what he was hiding. Andre closed his eyes briefly, centering himself. This was going to be a long night, but he knew one thing for certain. When the truth finally came out, these officers would regret their actions. For now, though, he was just another black man in handcuffs, his word against theirs. And in this particular story, history had rarely favored people who looked like him. As the cruiser pulled away from the curb, Andre watched his car, and the briefcase containing information that could affect national security, disappear into the distance. Whatever happened next would depend on how quickly he could contact his superiors, and how much damage these officers would do before the truth caught up with them. The processing room at the Oak Ridge Heights Police Department smelled of industrial cleaner and stale coffee. Andre sat on a metal bench, his suit jacket wrinkled from the hours spent in the holding cell. His fingerprints had been taken, his belongings cataloged and stored, except for the briefcase, which remained locked in the evidence room, still unopened despite the officer's best efforts. The clock on the wall read 4:17 a.m. Andre had been here for nearly 4 hours, and they'd only just allowed him his phone call 15 minutes ago. He'd left a carefully worded message for his department head, using their established code phrases to convey the urgency without revealing classified information over an unsecured line. The door swung open, and a tired-looking woman in her 40s entered. She wore a gray pantsuit and carried a worn leather portfolio. "Mr. Taylor?" she asked, extending her hand. "I'm Diane Chen, your public defender." Andre shook her hand. "Thank you for coming at this hour." "Let's talk about your situation," she said, taking a seat across from him. "You've been charged with obstruction of justice, resisting arrest, and they're trying to add possession of unidentified controlled substances." "What?" Andre sat up straighter. "That's ridiculous. There are no drugs in my briefcase. They're claiming reasonable suspicion based on your refusal to open it." She flipped through some papers. "According to the arrest report, you were combative and uncooperative during a routine traffic stop. Officer Williams states you made threatening movements and refused lawful commands." Andre shook his head. "None of that is true. I was completely cooperative until they tried to force me to open my briefcase, which I'm not authorized to do outside secure facilities." Diane looked at him carefully. "What exactly do you do for a living, Mr. Taylor?" Andre hesitated. "I work as a consultant for the federal government. That's all I can say without proper clearance protocols. Mr. Taylor, I need the whole truth if I'm going to help you." "I understand, but I'm bound by federal law. What I can tell you is that briefcase contains classified material related to national security. Opening it would violate several federal statutes and potentially compromise sensitive operations." Diane sighed, clearly not fully believing him. He'd seen that look before. People assumed he was exaggerating or playing games. "The DA is pushing this case hard," she said. "There's been a string of break-ins in Oak Ridge Heights over the past month. Wealthy neighborhood, influential residents. They want results. And I'm the convenient solution," Andre said. "A black man in an expensive suit driving through a white neighborhood at night." Diane didn't disagree. "Your arraignment is at 9 this morning. Judge Patterson. He's tough but fair. We'll enter a not guilty plea and request immediate release." "What about my briefcase?" "It's being held as evidence. We'll file a motion for its return, but honestly, that might complicate things. If you just explain what's in it." "I can't," Andre said firmly. "Trust me, I want to resolve this as quickly as possible, but there are protocols I have to follow." The door opened again and an officer appeared. "Time's up." Diane gathered her papers. "I'll see you at the arraignment. Try to get some rest." Rest seemed impossible as Andre was led back to the holding cell. He sat on the thin mattress, mind racing. His supervisor would get the message when the office opened at 7 a.m. Until then, he was on his own. All rise for the Honorable Judge Robert Patterson. The courtroom was surprisingly full for an early morning arraignment. Andre stood beside Diane at the defense table, acutely aware of the contrast between his rumpled suit and the freshly pressed uniforms of Officers Williams and Reynolds, who sat in the gallery behind the prosecutor's table. The prosecutor, a sharp-featured man named Howard Griffith, arranged his files with methodical precision. Andre had learned he was the assistant district attorney, ambitious and with a near-perfect conviction record. Case number 2025 CR 1872, State versus Andre Taylor, the clerk announced. Judge Patterson, a man in his 60s with salt and pepper hair and reading glasses perched on the end of his nose, looked up from his papers. "Charges?" Griffith stood. "Obstruction of justice, resisting arrest, and possession of suspected contraband, Your Honor." "How does the defendant plead?" "Not guilty to all charges, Your Honor," Diane replied. The judge looked at Andre over his glasses. "Bail recommendations?" "The state requests bail be set at $50,000, Griffith said. "The defendant was apprehended in an area that has experienced multiple break-ins. He refused to identify the contents of a secure case in his possession and was uncooperative with officers during a lawful stop." Diane stepped forward. "Your Honor, this is excessive. Mr. Taylor has no criminal record. He's a government consultant with deep ties to the community. He owns his home and has lived here for 8 years. He's not a flight risk." "Your Honor," Griffith countered, "the defendant claims to work for the government but has provided no verification. He refuses to explain the contents of a locked case, which officers had reasonable suspicion might contain stolen goods or controlled substances." Judge Patterson looked at Andre. "Mr. Taylor, can you provide any verification of your employment?" Andre straightened. "Your Honor, I work in a sensitive position that requires security clearance. I can provide verification through proper channels, but those channels require specific protocols. Convenient, Griffith muttered, just loud enough to be heard. Mr. Taylor, the judge continued, the court needs more than vague assertions. I understand. Your Honor, if I could make a supervised call to my department supervisor, I could begin the verification process. Judge Patterson considered this for a moment. Bail is set at $25,000. Next case. The gavel struck and Andre felt a mix of relief and frustration. $25,000 was better than $50,000, but still far more than typical for these charges. As Diane began explaining the bail process, Andre noticed Officers Williams and Reynolds huddled with Griffith, all three glancing his way occasionally. They're doubling down, Diane said, sliding a file across the table in the consultation room later that day. Andre had managed to post bail using his home as collateral, a process that had taken most of the day. He'd finally been able to contact his department through secure channels, but bureaucracy moved slowly, even in matters of national security. What do you mean? He asked, opening the file. The officers filed their official reports this morning. According to Williams, you were visibly intoxicated during the stop, though no breathalyzer was administered. Reynolds claims you made a sudden movement toward your waistband that made him fear for his safety. Andre stared at the papers in disbelief. That's completely fabricated. I was stone-cold sober and never made any threatening movements. They're also claiming your speech was slurred and your eyes were bloodshot, consistent with drug use. I'd just flown back from a 3-day work trip. My eyes were bloodshot from exhaustion. Andre ran a hand over his face. Do they have dash cam footage? Body cams? They claim the dash cam malfunctioned. Reynolds' body cam was allegedly not activated, and Williams says his fell off during your resistance. Convenient, Andre said, echoing Griffith's earlier comment. What about my car's dashboard camera? I had it recording. Diane looked up sharply. You have a personal dash cam? That wasn't in any of the reports. It's a small unit mounted near my rearview mirror. I installed it after a fender bender last year. If they didn't find it or chose to ignore it, the footage should still be there. This could change everything, Diane said, making a note. I'll file a motion to have your vehicle examined immediately to secure that evidence. What about my briefcase? Still in the evidence lockup. They filed for a warrant to open it based on probable cause, but they need to convince a judge. Andre checked his watch. It had been nearly 18 hours since his arrest. His supervisor would be working on verification, but these things took time, especially given the classified nature of his work. Mr. Taylor, Diane said carefully, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Andre nodded. Are you really who you say you are? Because if you're in some kind of trouble, if there's something else going on, I need to know now. He met her gaze steadily. Ms. Chen, I understand your skepticism, but I promise you, within the next 24 hours there will be verification of my identity and position. Until then, I'm asking you to trust that I'm telling you the truth. She studied him for a long moment, then nodded slightly. The preliminary hearing is scheduled for the day after tomorrow. Judge Patterson will preside. The prosecution will present their evidence, including testimony from the officers. And my dashboard camera footage? If we can secure it in time, yes. I've already drafted the motion. As Andre prepared to leave, Diane added, the DA's office is under pressure to address these break-ins. They think they've found their scapegoat. Be careful, Mr. Taylor. Don't go near Oak Ridge Heights and don't contact either of those officers. Andre nodded. I know how this works. They've painted their picture of me. Now we have to show the truth. Walking out of the courthouse into the early evening air, Andre felt the weight of the situation pressing down on him. His freedom, his career, his reputation, all hanging in the balance because 2 officers decided he didn't belong in that neighborhood. As he waited for his rideshare to arrive, he gazed up at the American flag fluttering above the courthouse steps and wondered how many others had stood in his place. Without the resources or connections he had, the difference was, Andre knew something those officers didn't, and soon, everyone in that courtroom would know it too. The preliminary hearing room was smaller than the main courtroom, with wood-paneled walls and fluorescent lighting that cast everyone in an unflattering pallor. Andre sat beside Diane, both of them reviewing last-minute notes before the proceedings began. 2 days had passed since his arraignment. 2 days of phone calls, paperwork, and mounting frustration. Any word from your department? Diane whispered. Andre nodded slightly. They're sending someone. Should be here within the hour. Let's hope it's soon enough, she replied, glancing toward the prosecution table where Griffith was arranging his files with military precision. Officers Williams and Reynolds sat directly behind him, both looking freshly pressed and professional in their uniforms. Williams caught Andre's eye and held his gaze for a moment before looking away with a dismissive expression. The bailiff called the room to order as Judge Patterson entered, his black robe flowing behind him. "Be seated," he said, adjusting his reading glasses. "Preliminary hearing for case number 2025 CR 1872 is now in session." Griffith rose immediately. "Your Honor, the state is prepared to present evidence showing probable cause for all charges against the defendant." "Proceed," the judge said. "The state calls Officer Daniel Williams." Williams took the stand with practiced confidence, swearing to tell the truth with his right hand raised. After establishing his credentials, 8 years on the force, commendations for bravery, specialized training in narcotics detection, Griffith began walking him through the night of Andre's arrest. "And why did you initially pull over the defendant's vehicle?" Williams leaned slightly forward. "We had received reports of suspicious activity in the area. A resident called in about an unfamiliar vehicle circling the neighborhood." Andre frowned. This was new information, not mentioned in any of the reports Diane had shown him. "When you approached the vehicle, what did you observe about the driver?" He appeared nervous. "When I asked for his license and registration, his hands were shaking. I also noticed his eyes were bloodshot and he seemed disoriented." "Objection," Diane called. "The officer conducted no field sobriety test and has no medical training to make such assessments. I'm simply stating my observations based on 8 years of police experience," Williams countered smoothly. "Overruled," Judge Patterson said. "The officer may state his observations," Griffith continued. "What happened next, Officer Williams?" "The suspect, the defendant, was evasive about his destination and purpose in the neighborhood. When questioned, he gave vague answers about consulting work but couldn't provide specifics. Given the recent break-ins in the area, this raised red flags." Andre clenched his jaw but remained silent. Diane made quick notes on her legal pad. "At what point did you decide to search the vehicle?" "After observing the defendant's nervous behavior and inconsistent statements, I asked him to step out of the vehicle. During a routine pat-down for officer safety, I observed a locked briefcase on the passenger floor. When questioned about its contents, the defendant became agitated and refused to open it." "And how did the defendant respond when you instructed him to exit the vehicle?" Williams straightened in his chair. "Initially, he questioned my authority to make the request. After repeated instructions, he complied but continued to argue. When asked about the briefcase, he became increasingly hostile." "Did you at any point feel threatened by the defendant?" "Yes. After exiting the vehicle, he made a sudden movement toward his waistband. Given the circumstances, I considered this a potential threat." Andre leaned toward Diane. "That's a complete lie," he whispered. She squeezed his arm in warning to stay quiet. "What happened next?" Griffith asked. "I instructed the defendant to place his hands behind his back for officer safety." He initially resisted, tensing his arms and attempting to pull away. "It required both myself and Officer Reynolds to secure him." With each fabricated detail, Andre felt his blood pressure rising. These officers weren't just bending the truth. They were creating an entirely fictional narrative. The testimony continued for another 20 minutes, with Williams painting a picture of Andre as belligerent, potentially intoxicated, and deliberately uncooperative. When Griffith finally said, "No further questions," Andre could barely contain his anger. Diane approached the witness stand. "Officer Williams, you testified that Mr. Taylor appeared intoxicated. Did you administer a breathalyzer or field sobriety test?" "No, it wasn't necessary given the other circumstances." "So you have no empirical evidence that he was intoxicated?" "Only my observations based on years of experience." "You also stated Mr. Taylor was circling the neighborhood. Do you have any evidence of this beyond the alleged call from a resident?" Williams shifted slightly. "The call was logged at dispatch. Yet this alleged call wasn't mentioned in your initial report, was it?" "I must have overlooked including that detail." Diane pressed on. "Officer Williams, was your body camera operating during this encounter?" "No, it was dislodged during the suspect's resistance." "Convenient," Diane remarked. "And the dashboard camera in your patrol car?" "Technical malfunction. It happens. Indeed it does," Diane said dryly. Officer Williams, were you aware that Mr. Taylor's vehicle was equipped with its own dashboard camera? A flicker of surprise crossed Williams' face before he controlled his expression. No, I was not. Your Honor, Diane said, turning to the judge. The defense has secured the footage from Mr. Taylor's personal dashboard camera, which recorded the entire encounter. We'd like to enter it into evidence. Griffith was on his feet immediately. Objection. The defense didn't disclose this evidence in advance. We only secured the footage yesterday afternoon, Diane countered. The notification was filed with the court this morning. Judge Patterson frowned. I'll allow it, but I want to review the chain of custody documentation. A court officer set up a monitor as Diane inserted a flash drive. The footage began playing, showing the entire traffic stop from Andre's perspective. The audio was clear enough to capture every word exchanged. As the video played, the courtroom remained silent. It clearly showed Andre being cooperative, speaking calmly, and making no threatening movements. It captured Williams becoming increasingly aggressive despite Andre's politeness, and most damningly, it recorded Williams loudly claiming Andre was resisting, while the video clearly showed he was standing perfectly still. When the footage ended, Diane turned to Williams. Officer, how do you explain the discrepancies between your testimony and this video evidence? Williams' face had hardened. The camera angle doesn't show everything. The defendant's body language and tone were threatening in ways the video doesn't capture. Your Honor, Griffith interrupted. We question the authenticity of this video. It could have been edited or manipulated. The defense has submitted the original file with metadata intact, Diane responded. We welcome forensic examination. Judge Patterson rubbed his temple. We'll take a 15-minute recess while I consider the admissibility of this evidence. Court is in recess. As the judge left the room, Andre noticed Officers Williams and Reynolds in intense conversation with Griffith. Their expressions suggested the video had thrown a significant wrench into their plans. This is good, Diane whispered. The video contradicts almost everything Williams claimed. What about the briefcase? Andre asked. That's still their leverage. One battle at a time, she replied. Oh. She nodded toward the back of the courtroom where a woman in a tailored Navy suit had just entered. Is that your department contact? Andre turned to see Lisa Harrington, the legal liaison for his division, scanning the room. When she spotted him, she gave a subtle nod before taking a seat in the back row. Yes, that's her, Andre confirmed, feeling a surge of relief. Things are about to get interesting. When court resumed, Judge Patterson looked troubled. After reviewing the defense's video evidence, I find it admissible. However, he added as Diane began to smile, due to questions about potential tampering, I'm ordering a forensic analysis before giving it full evidentiary weight. Until that analysis is complete, the testimony of Officer Williams stands. Griffith looked pleased with this compromise, while Diane struggled to hide her disappointment. The state calls Officer James Reynolds, Griffith announced. Reynolds' testimony largely corroborated Williams, adding supposed details about Andre's slurred speech and unstable gait that were nowhere visible in the dashboard footage. He also elaborated on the briefcase, claiming Andre had been suspiciously protective of it. Given the context, an unknown individual in a high-theft area, acting erratically, with a locked case he refused to open, we had reasonable suspicion that it contained either stolen goods or controlled substances, Reynolds testified. And has this briefcase been opened for examination? Griffith asked. Not yet. It has some kind of biometric lock. The department's technical unit is still working on accessing it. After Reynolds' testimony concluded and cross-examination had chipped away at some of his claims, Judge Patterson turned his attention to the briefcase question. Mr. Taylor, he said directly, this matter could be resolved quickly if you would consent to opening your briefcase for examination. Andre stood. Your Honor, I understand how this looks, but I'm bound by federal law regarding the handling of classified materials. Opening that briefcase in an unsecured setting would violate multiple security protocols. The judge frowned. Mr. Taylor, this court has heard vague references to your alleged government work, but has seen no verification. Without something concrete, I'm inclined to grant the prosecution's request for a forced examination of the briefcase's contents. Andre took a deep breath. Your Honor, I'd like to request a private conference in your chambers with yourself, Ms. Chen, and Mr. Griffith. There's someone from my department present who can provide verification, but certain aspects cannot be discussed in open court. Judge Patterson studied Andre for a long moment, then nodded. Very well. We'll recess to chambers. Ms. Chen, Mr. Griffith, Mr. Taylor, and who is this department representative? Andre turned and gestured to Lisa, who was already walking forward. Lisa Harrington, Your Honor. Legal counsel for the department in question. As they moved toward the judge's chambers, Andre caught the confused expressions on the officers' faces. Their carefully constructed case was about to unravel in ways they couldn't possibly imagine. Judge Patterson's chambers felt worlds away from the tense courtroom they'd just left. Leather-bound law books lined the walls, and a large mahogany desk dominated the space. The judge removed his robe and hung it carefully on a wooden coat rack before taking his seat. All right, he said, gesturing for everyone to sit in the chairs arranged before his desk. Mr. Taylor, you've made some significant claims about your employment and that briefcase. It's time for clarity. Andre nodded to Lisa, who placed her credentials on the judge's desk. Lisa Harrington, Senior Legal Counsel for the Central Intelligence Agency, she said, her voice calm and authoritative. I'm here to verify Mr. Taylor's identity and position. Griffith's eyes widened slightly, but he quickly composed himself. With respect, Your Honor, anyone can claim government affiliation. We need proper verification. Of course, Lisa replied, sliding a sealed envelope across the desk. This contains authorization from the CIA General Counsel, with contact numbers for verification. You're welcome to call right now, Judge Patterson. The judge opened the envelope and examined the documents inside. He picked up his desk phone and dialed one of the numbers listed. After identifying himself and reading off a series of verification codes from the document, he listened intently for several minutes, occasionally saying yes or I understand. When he finally hung up, his expression had transformed completely. Mr. Griffith, he said to the prosecutor, it appears we have a situation. Your Honor, I've just spoken with the CIA's General Counsel's office. They've confirmed Mr. Taylor's identity and position. He turned to Andre. Mr. Taylor, or should I say Deputy Director Taylor? Andre nodded slightly. That's correct, Your Honor. I serve as Deputy Director of Intelligence for the Eastern Europe Division. Diane looked at her client with new eyes, clearly stunned by this revelation. What exactly does that entail? The judge asked. I oversee intelligence gathering and analysis operations across several countries, Andre explained. I was returning from a briefing in Chicago with various agency heads when I was pulled over. Griffith leaned forward. Even if Mr. Taylor works for the CIA, that doesn't automatically invalidate the charges. Government employees aren't above the law. You're absolutely right, Lisa interjected. But it does provide context for why Deputy Director Taylor couldn't open his briefcase when demanded by Officers Williams and Reynolds. She turned to Andre. Would you explain the nature of the materials? Within appropriate limits? Andre shifted forward in his chair. The briefcase contains a secure tablet with classified intelligence reports and analysis related to ongoing operations. It's sealed with a biometric lock that will only open in secure facilities with proper authentication protocols. Attempting to force it open would trigger security measures that permanently encrypt all data. These security measures are standard for field operatives at Deputy Director Taylor's level, Lisa added. He was following established protocols, not being deliberately obstructive. Judge Patterson rubbed his chin thoughtfully. This certainly casts the events in a different light. Your Honor, Griffith said, trying a new angle. While this explains Mr. Taylor's reluctance to open the briefcase, it doesn't address his behavior during the traffic stop. Officers Williams and Reynolds maintain he was uncooperative and possibly intoxicated. I believe the dashboard camera footage already contradicted most of those claims, Diane pointed out. Footage that hasn't been properly authenticated, Griffith countered. Lisa pulled a tablet from her briefcase. Perhaps this will help clarify matters. As part of our internal investigation, we retrieved satellite imagery of the traffic stop. She turned the tablet to show a high-resolution aerial view of Andre's car pulled over on the street, timestamped to match the night of his arrest. You had a satellite tracking Mr. Taylor? Judge Patterson asked, clearly surprised. We monitor the movements of all senior personnel handling sensitive materials, Lisa explained, for their protection and for national security. She pressed play and the footage showed the entire interaction from above. While facial expressions weren't visible from this angle, Body positioning and movements were clear. The footage corroborated Andre's account and his dashboard camera recording, showing no signs of resistance or threatening movements. The room fell silent as the video concluded. "I think we've seen enough," Judge Patterson said quietly. He looked at Griffith. "Mr. Griffith, given this new information, what is the state's position?" The prosecutor seemed to be processing the rapid shift in circumstances. "The state would need time to review this new evidence and consult with the district attorney's office." "I'm afraid time is a luxury we don't have," Lisa interjected. "This situation has already created a significant security concern." Deputy Director Taylor was scheduled to brief the National Security Council tomorrow morning on developments that directly impact ongoing operations. His briefcase contains essential materials for that meeting. She placed another document on the judge's desk. "This is an official request from the Director of National Intelligence for immediate dismissal of all charges and the return of all materials to Deputy Director Taylor on grounds of national security." Judge Patterson studied the document, then looked up at Griffith. "Mr. Griffith, I'm inclined to grant this request. Do you have any substantive objections?" The prosecutor recognized defeat when he saw it. "No, Your Honor. The state will not oppose dismissal." "Very well." The judge turned to Andre. "Deputy Director Taylor, I apologize for this unfortunate situation. This court will order the immediate dismissal of all charges and the return of your property." "Thank you, Your Honor," Andre replied. "One more thing," the judge added. "This meeting never happened. The official record will show that the charges were dismissed due to insufficient evidence. No mention of Mr. Taylor's position or employer will appear in any court documents. That would be appreciated." "Your Honor," Lisa said, as they prepared to leave the chambers. Griffith approached Andre. "For what it's worth, I had no idea who you were. I was just doing my job based on the officer's reports." Andre looked at him evenly. "And that's the problem, isn't it? You took their word at face value, despite the inconsistencies. How many others without my resources have you prosecuted on the same basis?" Griffith had no answer for that. Back in the courtroom, Judge Patterson announced the dismissal of all charges without explanation, ordering the immediate return of all property to Andre. Officers Williams and Reynolds sat in stunned silence, their expressions a mixture of confusion and growing concern. As the courtroom cleared, Lisa pulled Andre aside. "A car is waiting to take you directly to headquarters. The director wants a full debrief on this incident." "What about my briefcase?" "Being retrieved as we speak. It'll meet us at the car." Diane approached, still processing everything she'd learned. "So all this time," Andre offered a small smile. "I'm sorry I couldn't tell you everything. Thank you for believing in me enough to fight for me." "I'm not sure I did fully believe you," she admitted. "Not until today. That's what makes you a good lawyer. Healthy skepticism." He extended his hand. "Thank you for your help, Ms. Chen." As they shook hands, Diane asked, "What happens to the officers?" "That's not my department," Andre replied, though his expression suggested he had thoughts on the matter. "But false police reports and perjury are serious offenses. I imagine Internal Affairs will be very interested in their dashboard camera malfunction and the discrepancies in their testimony." "Director Taylor," Lisa called from the doorway. "We need to leave now." Andre nodded, then turned back to Diane. "People like to believe that justice is blind, but too often it sees exactly what it expects to see. Today was a reminder that sometimes those expectations can be dangerously wrong." As Andre walked out of the courtroom, he passed Officers Williams and Reynolds in the hallway. Their earlier confidence had evaporated, replaced by the nervous demeanor of men who sensed their careers hanging in the balance. Williams started to speak, but Andre kept walking, his mind already shifting to the national security briefing he needed to prepare. Outside the courthouse, a black SUV with tinted windows waited at the curb. A man in a suit held the door open, Andre's briefcase secure in his other hand. "Welcome back, sir," he said as Andre approached. "Headquarters is expecting you." Andre took the briefcase, feeling its familiar weight. The past 48 hours seemed surreal now, from respected intelligence officer to suspected criminal and back again in the span of 2 days. As he settled into the back seat, he couldn't help but wonder how differently things might have turned out if he hadn't had the resources and connections of the CIA behind him. The car pulled away from the courthouse, leaving behind 2 police officers whose actions had just placed them in the crosshairs of both their own department and one of the most powerful intelligence agencies in the world. Their reckoning was just beginning. 3 weeks had passed since the courthouse revelation. Andre sat in his office overlooking the Potomac River, reviewing intelligence reports while occasionally glancing at the news playing silently on the wall-mounted screen. His briefcase sat on a nearby credenza, a constant reminder of how quickly life could change. A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he called. Lisa Harrington entered, carrying a folder stamped with "Confidential" in bold red letters. "The final report from Internal Affairs," she said, placing it on his desk. "Thought you'd want to see it." Andre opened the folder. The investigation into Officers Williams and Reynolds had moved with unusual speed, driven partly by pressure from unnamed federal agencies and partly by the police chief's desire to contain the public relations damage. "Officer Williams resigned yesterday," Lisa said, sitting in the chair across from his desk. "Reynolds has been reassigned to administrative duty pending completion of a 16-week bias training program. Both are facing potential charges for filing false police reports and perjury." Andre nodded as he skimmed the document. "What about the prosecutor? Griffith? Received a formal reprimand for inadequate scrutiny of evidence. He's been reassigned to misdemeanor court." Lisa paused. "The district attorney wanted to sweep it under the rug, but Judge Patterson personally intervened. Apparently your case made quite an impression on him." Andre closed the folder. "And the dashboard camera footage? Released to selected media outlets yesterday after some initial resistance from the department. It's gone viral. The hashtag #DrivingWhileBlack is trending again." Andre glanced at the muted television where a news anchor was discussing police bias. The lower third of the screen showed, "Police officers caught on camera, racial profiling scandal rocks department." "The chief of police has announced new policies," Lisa continued. "Mandatory body cameras that can't be manually deactivated, independent review of all traffic stops resulting in searches or arrests, and expanded bias training for all officers." "Too little, too late for many," Andre observed. "But it's something." "There's one more thing," Lisa said, pulling another document from her portfolio. "The department wants to settle any potential civil claims before you file them. They're offering a substantial figure." Andre looked at the settlement proposal with its impressive number of zeros. "I don't want their money." "I figured you'd say that," Lisa replied with a small smile. "Which is why I took the liberty of suggesting an alternative." She pulled out another document. "Instead of a direct payment to you, they'll establish a fund to provide legal representation for individuals who can't afford it in cases involving alleged police misconduct." Andre studied the proposal. "The Tailored Justice Initiative?" "You can change the name if you want. The point is, the money goes toward preventing what happened to you from happening to others without your resources and connections." Andre considered this for a moment. "Keep the name. Not for my ego, but as a reminder to the department of exactly why this fund exists." "I'll make it happen," Lisa said, standing to leave. "Oh, and the director wants to see you at 2. Something about the operational changes you proposed." After Lisa left, Andre turned his chair to face the window. The view of the river and the city beyond always helped him think. 3 weeks ago, he'd been handcuffed in the back of a police car, his reputation and freedom in jeopardy because 2 officers saw a black man in an expensive car and made assumptions. His phone buzzed with a message from Diane Chen. "Saw the news about Williams resigning? Justice moves quickly when the CIA gets involved." Andre smiled slightly. He'd kept in touch with his former attorney, even offering her a position with the agency's legal team, which she'd politely declined, preferring to continue her work as a public defender. He typed back, "Not quickly enough for those without federal badges." That was the thought that had haunted him since that night. His CIA credentials had saved him, but what about the countless others who faced similar situations without such protection? The dashboard camera had been his insurance policy, but even that might not have been enough without the weight of a government agency behind him. The community meeting room at the Oak Ridge Heights Police Department was packed beyond capacity. Residents filled every chair, with more standing along the walls and spilling into the hallway. Chief Howard Bennett, a veteran officer with 30 years on the force, stood at the podium looking uncomfortable in the glare of camera lights. The actions of Officers Williams and Reynolds violated not only department policy, but the trust of this community. he stated, reading from prepared remarks. Their behavior does not reflect the values of this department or the majority of officers who serve with honor. In the back of the room, Andre stood quietly, dressed in a simple suit with no outward indication of his government position. He'd come not as a CIA deputy director, but as a citizen concerned about his community. In addition to the disciplinary actions already taken, we are announcing today a comprehensive review of all traffic stops and arrests from the past 3 years to identify any patterns of bias, the chief continued. We're also implementing new training protocols and community oversight measures. A woman in the front row raised her hand. My son was arrested last year under similar circumstances. Will his case be reviewed too? All cases will be examined, the chief assured her. Another resident stood. How do we know these new policies will change anything? We've heard promises before. That's why we've established an independent review board with community representatives, the chief explained. And we've created the Taylor Justice Initiative to provide legal support for those who believe they've experienced misconduct. At the mention of the initiative, several heads turned toward Andre. Word had gotten around about his case, though the classified details remained secret. He nodded slightly in acknowledgement but remained silent. After the meeting, as people filed out, an older man approached Andre. You're him, aren't you? The one they tried to frame? Andre nodded cautiously. My grandson got pulled over in this neighborhood 3 times last month, the man said. No ticket, no warning, just routine checks. He's a medical student at Hopkins. Has he filed a complaint? Andre asked. The man laughed without humor. What's the point? Nobody listens until something big happens, like with you. What made them finally take you seriously? Andre considered his answer carefully. Evidence they couldn't ignore. And persistence. And connections, the man added knowingly. Don't forget that part. Most of us don't have friends in high places. As the man walked away, Andre felt the weight of his words. The Taylor Justice Initiative was a start. But true change would require more than money and policies. It would require a fundamental shift in perceptions and power dynamics. 6 months later, Andre sat in a conference room at CIA headquarters, presenting operational recommendations to a panel of senior officials. His experience had led to new protocols for intelligence officers working domestically, including improved coordination with local law enforcement and enhanced legal protection measures. The Williams-Reynolds incident, as we now refer to it, exposed vulnerabilities in our field protocols, Andre explained. Our personnel need better protection when operating on U.S. soil, especially those from minority backgrounds who face additional scrutiny. After the meeting, the CIA director pulled Andre aside. The Attorney General called this morning. Officer Reynolds' case is going to trial next month. They want to know if you'll testify. I thought the department was trying to handle it internally, Andre said. They were until 3 more cases surfaced with similar patterns. The Justice Department is taking over the investigation now. They're looking at potential civil rights violations. Andre nodded. I'll testify. Later that evening, as Andre drove home, he passed through the same Oak Ridge Heights neighborhood where everything had started. New signs were posted at the community entrances. Bias-free zone, all traffic stops recorded. It was a small victory in a much larger battle, but it was something. His dashboard camera was still in place, though now it was just one of many precautions he took as a matter of course. The experience had changed him, making him more aware of his vulnerability despite his position. As he pulled into his driveway, he noticed a young black teenager watching him from across the street. The boy raised his hand in a tentative wave, and Andre waved back, wondering if the boy knew who he was or what had happened. It didn't really matter. What mattered was that maybe, just maybe, that boy would face one less obstacle in his future because of the changes set in motion by one traffic stop on a quiet night 6 months ago. The Taylor Justice Initiative had already taken on 37 cases, 122, and forced settlements in 9 others. It wasn't enough, would never be enough, but it was a start. A reminder that sometimes justice could prevail, even if it took resources and connections that should never have been necessary in the first place. Andre gathered his briefcase and headed inside, already thinking about his testimony for the upcoming trial. This time he wouldn't be the one on defense, and this time, the truth wouldn't need a security clearance to be believed.